let me just very quickly go through some house rules. First, this conference was put together hastily, quickly, urgently. Inevitably, you will see some of the seams showing. When you do, please just kindly tell us and then look away. Second, I think those of us who go to conferences a lot know that free speech does not apply to extended comments disguised as questions. But seriously, we looked at our conference design and decided that we want more questions, and the way to get more questions is to ask you to write them down. Ushers will get them from you, and these will be handed over to the moderators who will sift through them and select the best questions. I hope that's all right with you. We will also be taking questions from Twitter. And third, we are running a bit late, about 15 minutes late, but we will stick to our schedule, which includes ample time for breaks and lunch. And there is a reason for this. For many of us, this is our first time to meet each other. Let's seize the moment and network, because whatever our answer will be to the problem of disinformation, you and I know that that answer will only have to be collective. So, to our conference then, I wish all of us courage, clarity, and commitment. Our first session begins with what we can call the world premiere of a video produced by Verifiles. Ladies and gentlemen, the President as source of disinformation.
Walan, handa ka na ba?
Handa na po, Mayor.
Halika na, baguhin natin ang bayan.
I, Rodrigo Roa Duterte, do solemnly swear. There's a 3 million drug addicts. There are. I'd be happy to slaughter them. Sino ang sunod? Dilima. I announce my separation from the United States. I had to declare martial law in the Mindanao group of violence.
Indeed, the Philippines has witnessed many changes since Rodrigo Duterte became president, including in the sphere of disinformation.
I do not lie because I do not have the obligation to anybody to lie. So why should I lie and keep on lying to cover the lie? I'm a lawyer and I study geopolitics and all. And also, I am a graduate of the Foreign Service. I took AB Foreign Service. Check it out with Lesio. Mahirap lang rin ako na tao. I come from a poor father. Tatay ko gobernador noon. May iniwan sa amin. Hindi kami mahirap rin. Hindi naman ako imbitado dito sa Manila ng mga social gathering. Wala kami noon, mahirap lang. My father was governor when he died. At least alam niya maghanap buhay because we had a nice plant and a lumber yard. Yung fourth year pa kami. I had $1 million already. Ako hindi ako milyonaryo. I promise you now in front of the soldiers and everybody, I will produce that account. At sinasabi ko sa inyo, you can shoot me if it exceeds 40 million. With 4 million drug addicts, it could cause the failure of my country.
I'm losing 2 policemen a day, either police or military man.
I lose 3 to 4 policemen and soldiers a day. I lose 4, 5 soldiers and policemen every day. You can be very sure of this. I'm losing on the average 6 to 8 soldier or policemen in Mindanao in drug-related cases.
Attorney Antonio Pesena of Iloilo City, Erwin Tongtong Plagata, Iloilo City. The most, is there such a word, shabulized? You would say that. Wala akong personal sa kanila, ha? Iloilo.
The question of this tussle about the dictatorship of Marcos is something which cannot be determined at this time. That part of the sins of Marcos has yet to be proven by a competent court. President Marcos was a president for so long, and he was a soldier. Whether or not he performed worse or better, there's no study, there's no movie about it.
Itong gaskon na to, nakikialam pa doon sa during the incident. Huwag kang pumasok dyan. Palibasa nga hindi nga abogado ang tunto.
I can invent. I'm coming up with Trillanes' bank deposits. All over the DBS account in Singapore has a balance of 193,000.
Wala ito. Produkto ng isip ko to. Tinanggalan ko lang, tignan ko talaga. Ginamit mo, kasi nadya ba yan?
Disinformation discredits its targets, painting them as enemies to be annihilated, inciting violence. Such is the evil of disinformation. Journalists have the responsibility of stopping the spread of disinformation. The task is not easy, particularly when the chief source of disinformation is the highest official of the land and media is also a target. Before taking his oath of office, President-elect Duterte put media on notice.
You know guys, you take too much of yourself. Alam mo ano, you want your cake and eat it too. That's the problem with some journalists in this country. If worse comes to worse, then we'll have just to expose each other. Huwag na nyo akong ano niya kasi Presidente vulnerable to attacks. Not me. Not me.
In Malacanang, President Duterte put pressure on media that has been critical and doggedly covering him.
Kasi may mga press pala na walang alam kung hindi kasi nung magbuti ang magbabuyan na tayo dito. Hindi magbabuyan tayo araw-araw. But someday, hindi ko tinatakot, but someday yung karma nila dadating. Just because you have the power of press freedom. The issue here is not press freedom.
Mahirap kasi itong... Nga sabihin mo ako, pinapatay ko yung media. Oh, why should I do it? For what purpose?
President Duterte answered his own question before he was sworn into office.
In journalism, you speak the truth firmly, then you invite danger. I'm challenging you guys. Kill journalism, stop journalism in this country. If you are worth your salt, you should accept the challenge.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ellen Tordesillas, Diosa Labiste, Ron Habal, and Chirian George. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator for this session, Ms. Malou Mangahas.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I think we have a very distinguished panel of experts here. So maybe first off, we'll give each one of them 5 minutes or 10 minutes just for their preliminary statements. Ellen?
Okay. Hi, good morning, everybody. From the perspective of a journalist, in covering President Duterte, one of the serious challenges is making sure that we do not allow ourselves to be used to peddle fake information. An engaging speaker, President Duterte is often loose with facts, as you've seen in the video. Given the nature of new media, when the public gets the news real time, and with the frequency with which the president spews out unsubstantiated information and often times outright falsehoods, it's difficult for fact checkers to keep pace with him. If you are going by the Goebbels theory that a lie becomes truth if repeated often enough, a journalist, by repeatedly reporting, accurately quoting Duterte's false claims, inadvertently becomes a peddler of falsehood, which is contrary to a journalist's mandate to inform the public correctly of what is happening in the community and in the country, to enable them to understand what's going on, to guide them in making decisions about an issue or a situation. I think that's the number one challenge that journalists covering Duterte is.
Thank you, Ellen. So, challenge tossed to the journalists: how do you discern and not peddle disinformation? No? Now we have Josa or Cherian. The view from academe, Cherian George from... So how could the academe weigh in on this? What's the problem?
I think, well, I don't know whether this is an academic view, it's just my view, but I think the dilemma that the Philippines finds itself in exposes a couple of tensions within professional journalism that media scholars have observed, in fact, for decades. Duterte may be an extreme case because the language that he uses violates social norms. So this puts the reporters in an interesting dilemma because, how do you track this vulgarity without allowing it to consume or colonize the agenda or to lower the tone of public discourse. This is, I would call it the shithole dilemma, because it's similar to what the Americans, shithole, S-H-I-T-H-O-L-E.
Exactly. All right.
Yeah, so when Donald Trump used the term, you found the American media kind of confused. Some didn't want to say it, they used, they wouldn't spell it out. Others felt it was important to say what exactly Donald Trump said, and there are arguments on both sides. So I think when politicians are outright obscene or vulgar, that itself puts the media into a bit of a bind. But if you set aside the style of his speech, which is exceptional, and focus on the content, then maybe Duterte and Trump and so on are no longer such outliers, because obviously they are not the only politicians in the world with a tenuous relationship to facts. So this broader problem, I think, exposes attention within journalism between newsworthiness on the one hand and trustworthiness on the other. So the problem is that any newsmaker who is prominent and powerful is by definition newsworthy. And of course, if he excites controversy through his words and actions, that just accentuates his newsworthiness. But news value, of course, is not the same as truth value. So how do we deal with these situations where newsmakers, prominent newsmakers, mislead? Unfortunately, too many journalists perceive their role to be little more than stenographers, frankly, tracking, reporting what newsmakers say and do, which results in the media then amplifying the newsmakers' misinformation uncritically. There are, of course, journalists who do not take this view, who instead accept they have a truth-seeking function, but they too are caught in a bind because the main problem they face is a more practical one. To independently ascertain the truth can be extremely resource-intensive, and most media organizations simply don't have the kinds of manpower it takes to conduct sort of conclusive investigations into the truth of the matter. Hence the relevance of third-party fact-checking like Verifiles is doing here in the Philippines. But mostly, the media have little option but to sort of seek truth by reporting what different sources, versions say about the truth, and hope that the net effect is to create more enlightenment. It sometimes works, not always, because you might find that the most of the sources have their own agendas. None of the sources may be truthful, sometimes the case. So that still doesn't reduce the relevance or the importance of journalists digging for the truth themselves. But like I said, practically very, very difficult. Another tension on top of this has to do with the norms and values of the profession. When you are faced with popularly elected officials who systematically and cynically subvert reason to grow their power, there's a strong case, I think, for public interest media to say, well, no, a line has been crossed. We have to get off our neutral fence and take sides for truth, take sides in favor of human rights against demagoguery. But then this carries the risk of losing the media's mantle of neutrality, losing its moral standing as an honest power broker, because let's not forget, these demagogues are popular. So when the media takes sides in this way, for very good reason, in favor of truth, justice, human rights, against the opposite, there is a very real risk that it diminishes its own ability to reach out to the nation as a whole, because you'll be seen as offending the fans and the supporters of those demagogues.
Taking sides.
So unfortunately, all I've done is to actually say that the problem highlighted in this video and that we've touched on is even more serious than,
Than just
than we can think of. No solutions, but then academics never have solutions to it.
All right. But at least you have proposals to reach solutions. Diosa is also from the University of the Philippines College of Mass Comm. How do you weigh in on this? Has media been more stenographer than truth seeker in this country when covering Duterte?
Well, I teach at UP Mascom, but I was also a journalist for 20 years. I was a community journalist. For me, when Duterte statements enter into the arena of discursive struggle, i.e. the public sphere, they're not merely utterances, they're actually what we call a speech act, something like how authority is performed in public office through words. So if they are false information, they are fake news, they have to be debunked, fact-checked, and denounced by media, by social media or the public. Some statements might be misogynist, virulent, and extreme, representing extreme views, like when they induce killing or encourage impunity among like the military or the police. And they should not be regarded by journalists as just one of those ideas that have to be included in the news story for the sake of balance or for balance sake. I think they should be qualified as statements that are hateful or dangerous or beyond what is acceptable in a democratic society. Because I think it's still within the bounds of journalism's commitment to truth-telling and civic duty that we have to be critical in our coverage in relation to fake statements of Duterte and other public officials. I think the same judgment should also be cast on social media platforms like Facebook or Twitter, because fake news distribution, as what was mentioned in the video, over the internet and social media platform have bigger consequences and impact, because these are false information and forms of propaganda being massively distributed and algorithmically manipulated to be noticeable and to appear as truth. And I think we should think of solutions to these kinds of journalism practice, and also how to make Duterte, also the media and social media democratically accountable, and to hold ourselves to social and political judgment.
Okay, Ron Habal. Yeah, how is this playing out to you as a public relations practitioner? Is Duterte such a good master of spin? Or is it because, you know, apart from the substantive errors, he really has some intentions?
All right. The way, from a public relations lens, is we need to be able to look at Duterte and not just as a disseminator of information. I mean, a journalist would always look at it from that way, that Duterte is a source of information, that we are in the business of transmitting information. But I think we have to look at communication as a ritual, as drama, and that Duterte is not just giving you information, but providing you drama. And this is also what's happening on how his supporters interpret his message, that they are performing. They're not just receiving information, because all of us, I mean, I was once a journalist, we are interested in giving out information, unbiased, objective, but people are not reacting to that. People are reacting to the drama, to the numbers, to the lies. That's why the campaign that needed to be done is not just more informational, but also behavioral in nature. That's why we need to be able to understand him that way. Yes, there are lies. Yes, there are things that we need to be able to correct, even misogyny at that. But he's giving you a performance. He's performing. That's why that is how he projects himself. It may be his, it is in DNA, or it may be his an image. I mean, this is almost like a page from the Sandra Bullock movie called Crisis Our Brand. It's almost the same thing, right? And then his handler might be thinking that, hey, give us their numbers, give the numbers, heighten it up, and that's his image, right? Or he's just giving you lies as a strategy. Fake news, misinformation, disinformation, or even malinformation could be a strategy. So we need to be able to look at it from that way.
Now, that's a lot to chew on, huh? So, the drama, the context, I mean, the hyperbole that Duterte does, I don't know how the four panelists here would be reacting. The problem is, the mention has been made about the media lapping up everything, including the hateful speech or context of Duterte's statements, but also not checking fast enough. Ellen, we were talking about this earlier. So we let it pass. The mandate of the reporter is to just report it. We may be accurate, but also not truthful. Or we may be, I mean, you just rely on the statement, but didn't check exactly.
Yeah, that's really a problem because as reporters, our training is that to make sure that we quote the source accurately. That's number one. So, and given here in the Philippines, when like if you're a Malacanang reporter, you write about 6 stories, at least 6 stories a day, right? You don't anymore have time to verify whether what is saying, what the source is saying is true or not. So I think it's up to we should have more support from the desk to verify what, you know, I mean, it's when we come out with stories, it should come out with verification, but it cannot be done by the Malacanang reporter by himself. It's the nature of the coverage that, you know, it's so fast paced. Plus, like TV, because it's aired live, right? Usually, when Duterte spews out falsehood, yeah, it gets transmitted right away, right? So by the time you come out with your fact check, maybe the next day, and by that time, you know, it has already reached millions. So that's a problem. But my worry, I mean, Ron said it's about the drama, is why people lap it up. You know, if you see, like, when he said Dilima is next, people laugh. You know, like the other day when he said that if you see in PA, women in PA, the Amazonas, shoot them in the vagina, right? That, and people laughed. That makes me really makes me worried. So I think that is where the role of media becomes more urgent. Like, how can we reach that audience that enjoys Duterte?
Yeah, we are welcome to receiving your questions, but in the meantime, we'll get this going. How do you explain, Cherian, Josa, and Ron, a president who's a source of disinformation but gets very high approval ratings still in the surveys? A big dilemma for us.
He's a populist, but I call his populism rogue populism. This is a brand of populism, I think, which Duterte has. It started with, of course, being anti-elite. It projects itself to be anti-elite, pro-masses and out-group exclusion. But like any other populist leader, Duterte was elected to office through his charisma and his promise to disrupt the status quo. But I think that is where the paradox lies, because when in office, Duterte wanted to have more authority and power in him, or the concentration of power and authority in him, and he displays it or deploys punitive and coercive apparatuses of the state to, of course, silence dissent and critical ideas and free expression. I think this kind of populism is dangerous, and when married with the logic is about control and manipulation of citizen. And I think that kind of populism should be looked at by political scientists. What kind of rogue populism is this?
But he has support across income groups, A, B, C, D, E, Cherian. Dark populism across the region also seems to be a lingering trend.
Yeah, and across the world, I suppose.
Across the world.
I think when this first surfaced most dramatically in the rise of Trump, I think the instinct among many sort of well-educated liberals was to point out or to observe that, well, this is just how stupid people are, right? And I think you still hear that. We still hear
stupid or impatient about leaders.
Sorry?
Are they stupid, or are they so impatient about leaders that they would take a Duterte who could do shortcuts?
The easy answer, and I say easy because it kind of lets us off the hook, is to blame it on the people, right? I think the more challenging answer is to question how is it that the system has so badly let down so many people that they're willing to overturn the system, they're willing to rebel against expertise, elites, and so on? I think that's a much harder question because we end up pointing fingers at ourselves.
That's right.
When I say ourselves, I mean media, I mean universities, I mean larger institutions across society. Obviously, we have done something very, we have failed the people over a long time such that they're willing to opt for easy but wrong answers. I don't think most countries have, we've had really the courage to examine that side of the equation yet.
All right. And Ron? Yeah.
I think Duterte's politics, as many scholars in the Philippines would, I think, agree with me. It's anticipated in the kind of the political structures we have in the Philippines, which was of course described as elite, personality-oriented, Buddhism and cacique by some Cornell scholars, and also by Professor Roland Simbulan as what typifies, he calls the modern principalia. It's about power and prestige and wealth, and that's why people try to seek public office, because they want to accumulate power, prestige, and wealth. And make millions and not even disclose them.
Josa, Duterte says he's not of the elite. That's why he's really a counterculture in the series of presidents we had who came from the nobility. So you might say it's a failure of nobility in this country. That's why you have a Duterte. What do you think, Ron? You were talking about a strategy. Is the spin a strategy? The series of disinformation, is it part of the Duterte strategy?
There's no way of verifying that one, but from the peer perspective, I think it is, because you see that there's almost like a structure that they're following, right? Because you need to be able to determine, for instance, why there's so much support for this. It's because you need to be able to look at all of this from the perspective of a campaign. One is you need to be able to look at the source or the agent who are speaking, who are producing this content. We need to be able to look at it from the point of view of the message itself. How is the message being crafted? Because the messages and images are being crafted and developed using shared belief as a base, right? And then we have to look at it also from the perspective of the interpreter of the message. Who are these people that are interpreting the source of and the message of the and the message from the source? How are they interpreting it? Are they also, like the president, performing? Because as you know, all of you and all of us are guilty that every time we put up a status on our Facebook posts, we almost instantaneously look at it, whether people are liking it, whether people are sharing it. So if that information is, you share, that information, meaning we believe in that information, then the tendency is for us to share. And we're performing also for our followers, for those people who liked us. So we need to be able to look at it from that perspective, and that's the reason why this strategy is in a way winning, unfortunately. It's because they're giving you the information. They might not be interested in the information the journalists are sharing, but they're certainly packaging and repackaging that information so that it will appeal to the base of the base.
Okay. Ron points to the possibility, and I think by all indications, an apparatus, an ecosystem for disinformation or misinformation or hate speech in the country right now. So Duterte is probably a major exponent of it. But also you have disinformation by his army of paid trolls that validate and amplify his messages. I was thinking, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, how could we really start to flesh it out in terms that are clearer? Because you have Duterte, he will always be a newsworthy source, meaning the object of affection. I mean, not really good affection, but required by media to cover. But you have a disinformation army starting with his deputies. I think Secretary Aguirre had also spread a lot more disinformation, or probably the presidential spokesperson series, or maybe the Speaker of the House. Haven't they also provided their own bit of work in having this ecosystem of disinformation foisted upon the public? What are your thoughts? How do we deal with it?
Churian mentioned about just shows that the situation shows how stupid people are, no? And then that's why I'm asking. Like we always we think that we're superior than than the people of Duterte. You know, like we always we always say how Andanar is, you know, is not so brilliant, even Mocha. But look, yeah, I mean we always look down on them like that. But look, Mocha has 5 million followers. I mean, I don't have 5. I mean, I have only about 6,000, 10,000. How come Mocha has 5 million? And yet we think that we are superior than her. So why are we, Sharon said that we have failed. Yeah, so maybe we should learn how, Ron said, it's the packaging. Maybe we should learn from them how they do it.
Learn about the drama and the subtext, but not really the content. I mean, Cherian, what do you think? Is there an ecosystem, an apparatus, and how do you start dealing with Duterte when he thrives on such an apparatus?
Unfortunately, no easy answers. I mean, I have thought about this. Should we learn from the enemy, so to speak? Not that Duterte is my enemy. I have no dog in the race here. But should we learn from those who obviously do it better, yeah, for what we consider the wrong reasons? And part of it is that, yes, of course, progressive liberals, those defending democracy and human rights, do need to be at the top of their game in terms of communication skills, social media skills. But actually, I think that's not enough. And it's not enough simply because this is a case where the truth is a much harder sell than the lies. Yeah? And I say this especially when it comes to issues like governance and human rights. I say truth is a harder sell because the truth is that if you're looking at the economic problems of any country around the world, there are simply no easy answers. The truth is most groups, especially those currently privileged, will have to sacrifice. The truth is there's no easy answer to climate change. We have to make hard decisions and lose. Yeah? That is a very hard sell. How do you go out to people and tell them, well, yes, the truth is that looking at the state of the world or of our country, it is in fact not possible for any politician to guarantee you a job or a high standard of living. We all have to sacrifice in order to ensure some basic, decent living for all of us. Right? Very hard sell. Much easier sell to just make fake promises, which every politician does. So how can you compete with that? Similarly, on the human rights and hate speech side of it, the easy sell is to tell people, look, you are first and foremost Filipino or Muslim or Hindu and so on, and others people don't count. Tagging people or asking people to look at themselves in terms of their most obvious and salient identities, things that are more visceral, is easy. It is much harder to push the human rights line, which is that no, don't just think of your attachment to family or to race or to religion or to tribe. Think about the obligation you owe to strangers simply because they are members of the human race. It's a much harder sell. So this requires a deep civic education. It is more than a job for the media. It is certainly much more than can be captured in a clever soundbite or in a clever tweet. And that, by the way, is precisely why demagogues like Donald Trump choose this method. It's not because they are ideologically attached to certain, to either to white nationalism or whatever. It is because these are effective, easy political stunts. If it was as easy to promote democracy and human rights, Donald Trump would be championing that. He's not, because it's a hard sell. Yeah?
Is that correct, Ron? Lies easier to peddle than truth.
Lies, better packaged, is easier to sell than lies debunked, right? Which means the lies can be debunked. Lies can be fact-checked. But truth, when packaged well, and normally messages that are normally received well by people are either has various characteristics. One, it has to elicit an emotional response. That's why people love the messages, right? Another one, it has a powerful visual component. Most of our reports do not have that. And third, it has a strong narrative. And last, it is repeated. That's why campaigns are better consumed because they're repeated well. Can you imagine lies repeated many times are a lot better than a newspaper report just published once?
Goebbels.
Yes.
All right. Now,
You pointed it out, not me.
Yeah. Something like really the concept of post-truth, that we build our opinions more on emotional or value judgments on an issue. There is a question here related to that. Because the tactic is to be entertaining and dramatic, and therefore anti-intellectual, how do we, quote-unquote, sexify intellectual discernment? Thank you for the question. Sexify. Ellen, you're up to that. Let's sexify it. Ron's territory. Sexify it for us, Ron.
How can you sexify an Ellen Tordesillas story, right? I mean, that's the main question, right? How can you sexify an investigative report from PCIJ? The numbers, right? If you present data and facts and the numbers.
Or render it.
Render it, correct.
Use
Examples. Use real life experiences. I mean, most of the journalists would do that. However, journalists need time for that. That's why there's special reports. We've not seen a lot of special reports lately. I mean, it died down, in the early 2000s, whatever. We've not seen a lot of investigative reports in the mainstream media. Most of them are just basically spot reports, no in-depth. A lot of them will be relegated to public affairs shows in the cable news or in cable TV, not in free TV. So it's a good thing that some of the PCIJ and the Rappler and Veritas are coming out with this one, but even the take-up of those information, because we need to be able to kind of like sell that information as well, are not being picked up by the major papers, and that is a problem.
Cherian, you have more on sexifying? Don't like sex.
Sexiness is not my territory.
All right, just the sex. All right. There's another question. All leaders have lied to their publics at one time or another. Why is wholesale lying by our leaders allowed or more acceptable now? How has the internet, social media, how has the internet and social media contributed to this phenomenon? All panelists would have points of view on that? Yeah.
I think the basic effects of lying is that it undermines truth, because truth-telling is the norm of human communication. When you communicate, there's a presumption that you're going to tell the truth and not tell a lie. And that means we can no longer trust the information we receive if we do not debunk or we resort to all this lying. And also because it's a threat to democracy. If lies proliferate, we cannot make informed judgments and act together to improve our society or improve our lot. And of course, lies allow for a very polarized and symbolically violent politics, because people are lying and people are attacking the lies, and this, of course, would spiral into intensified lying and political aggression and eventually violence. And I think, as I said, truth-telling is presupposed in human communication, and you cannot sexify it. I think you just have to tell the truth.
Or you would have to find out and expose the lie. Yes. Cherian.
Well, I think certainly one problem that we all face is the dilution of the influence of what we call mainstream traditional news media. Yeah? That is not to sort of over-romanticize mainstream media or to suggest that they have never been in the history of mankind vehicles for big propaganda or industrial scale lies. They have, right? But still, by and large, you know, the act of the journalistic process does at least filter out some of the most egregious, most the craziest stuff out there, yeah, through the process of gatekeeping. And clearly, we now know that mainstream media gets much less mind share than it used to, and in its place has come much more direct communication by social media. So that certainly has contributed to the problem. Yeah.
All right. Ellen, you want to weigh in on that? The role of social media. Why are lies more acceptable now? Why is the lying easier to accept or tolerate now?
Yeah, we were talking earlier, like why is this, why the present government is making really a lot of headway in selling their lies is media has by nature has an adversarial role, right? Has an adversarial role, especially in relations with the government. But before, we have a government which are a little
more civil, a little more
civil,
gentle.
And, but this government has really no qualms, about lying and about running after media, and that's what we are up against. So I don't know.
No shame, in
yes.
no pretense. All right.
And that's what we are up against. And it seems that it's working because they really are able. It is really able to to create a chilling effect. Give really to really poison the atmosphere and to me.
Okay. Quick public service announcement. The Wi-Fi password is on the board for those who want to log on to their internet. Sorry po. Now there's another question. Information in social media tends to dwell within echo chambers. What strategies can fact checkers and truth seekers do to make sure that social media, to penetrate social media echo chambers, particularly those dominated by fake news? I think John put us in good stead here. The action and the solutions should be in the collective. I mean, I think the question is addressed to all sorts of people with specific roles to play in this. What can we do to penetrate social media echo chambers, particularly those dominated by fake news?
Yeah, because we have there's the danger of us preaching to the choir, right? So I always also say that I'm not really worried about Mocha Ozone, or because she's actually preaching to the choir. But then even it's 5 million, she has 5 million, right? But you have to remember, like there are 90 million Filipinos. So maybe we should give up on the 5 million of Mocha Ozone or the 15 million of Duterte, right? We have 25 million Filipinos who did not vote for Duterte. Maybe we should reach out to those people and to we are 90 million Filipinos. So if they have 15 million, we have 90 million minus 15, right? So we still, out there, we should maybe concentrate on that, that group of people.
All right. Ron, what can we do?
Some callers call it also echo chambers, some callers call it filter bubbles.
Filter bubbles.
Right, filter bubbles. We need to be able to, pinch it a bit. I mean, people are already doing it, fact-checking. But I think what most media organizations are also forgetting to do is also to source check, instead of just fact-checking information. Right. But we need to be able to trace who is the person or the groups or organization that actually delivered or produced the content itself. Source checking is also key, so that when we are able to pinpoint the source and verify whether the source is legit or not, then we'll be able to kind of like burst into that bubble as well. And also, and some scholars abroad as well are thinking, maybe we should be able to have a campaign of shaming people, those who shared false information.
All right, yeah. Cherian, are there lessons from elsewhere in Southeast Asia on how to deal with this?
It's a really difficult one. There are ongoing many interesting experiments about how to address this problem of filter bubbles, people speaking within their own echo chambers. So let's see how these pan out. But personally, I want to be a bit more, skeptical about the whole premise of this exercise, because I think part of our problem with these bubbles, these echo chambers on Facebook in particular, let's look at Facebook, is that we're looking at it from the lens that, these social media are new forms of media. Yeah? But what if we instead looked at it as a new form of conversation or social interaction. I mean, let's be honest. When is the last time you voluntarily had a 1 hour, 2 hour long conversation with people who were not like you? Right? The truth is, most of us, if we had a choice, would go out for dinner with people like us. We would spend our weekends with people like us. We don't then think about, okay, what should society do to penetrate our conversation and to gate crash our party? No, it's not considered a problem. In fact, it's considered important that we, in a crowded, very intrusive urban environment, we have the power to retreat into our spaces where we get to chat with people we care about, people who share our values, our religion. We don't see that as something alarming or wrong in terms of social interaction. Yeah. So why do we see that as a problem with Facebook? Yeah. So rather than simply seeing it as a problem to solve on Facebook, I would, in fact, ask the opposite problem: are we doing enough to create media experiences where we do get to confront other points of view, to have our views challenged, and so on? So I would say this is really a problem of things like underinvestment in public service broadcasting.
All right.
It's a problem maybe with how civics is taught, a problem with how politicians behave, certainly, not necessarily a problem with social media.
And the tyranny of deadlines, maybe, for many reporters. They just have to file within the day before they could fact check. But quickly, Josa, we have 3 more questions.
I think I have the right to be critical and select the information that I want to receive, and there should be no equivalence to the kind of information that I would like to have, and of course any other information that are circulating or probably floating around certain communities in Facebook. And I agree with Cherian that you have the capacity to decide on what information do you need and be critical about your source or the facts that are being offered in that kind of information.
All right, so it starts with us, discerning. Now, there are 3 questions here before we close. We're running out of time. Disinformation flourishes due to less discerning audiences. How do we make them more discerning? Related question, how can media control the deeply rooted Filipino mass thinking, which clearly contributes to the spread of disinformation around the country? So it's groupthink and mass. From J.C. Del Do of the Paulinian, St. Paul. And finally, related back to the topic, if the media's first duty is to the people, the truth, can its mantle of neutrality be lost? I mean, could you give up its neutrality position? And finally, back to script, why is Duterte being given special attention? For how many times did the previous presidents or high-ranking officials get away with their lies? So what's it about Duterte that makes him so special now? Okay, so first off, the first questions, how can we address a more discerning? How can we make the audience more discerning? And then what do you do with the spread of disinformation around the country when there's groupthink or mass thinking that, this president is president of the 16 million Filipinos?
How do you make the audience more discerning? Education. I mean, there's
Education.
no way to fight lies but with truth, right? And then you mentioned about neutrality,
Yeah.
something
Can you
like that.
lose that? Can you give up on neutrality?
I don't know. To me, all you have to do is tell the truth. Whether, I don't know. What do you mean by neutrality?
Maybe it's better acting independently is better, not neutrality.
You just tell the truth wherever it falls, Then why do we concentrate on Duterte? Because he's president of the Philippines. He's everything that he says could be translated into policies. It affects all of us.
Okay. So the other panelists, before we wind up, yes, Ron?
Sometimes the issue is not just the truth, but also the distribution of truth.
Yeah.
Where is it
Disseminating it
distributed,
well.
right? Technology is also a problem. I mean, if Facebook is just giving you one side of things and not the other side, then you're not exposed, because the algorithm of Facebook will just limit you to one side of the issue. So, I mean, that should also be pressured. Facebook should also be pressured into providing us and tinkering with their algorithms so that people are also exposed to other forms of on top of the media literacy. So again, media may be out there, being authentic, being fair, but if they're not being distributed enough to various channels, then that might be also a problem.
Okay, Cherian?
Well, maybe I'll just address that. I think it was the final point, which I appreciate that, Duterte probably isn't the first Philippine president to lie. I don't know. I take it that's true.
We all did.
But yes, I think it's interesting to look at why is it this whole issue of fake news, disinformation has suddenly risen on the public agenda over the last couple of years. Obviously, it's the Trump effect, and locally here, it's the Duterte effect, and so on. And if you take a wider sweep, it is simply not true that the harm caused by Trump's disinformation, for example, is off the charts. No. The single deadliest disinformation campaign of the 21st century that was state-sponsored did not come from a demagogue. It came from someone who's now looked at as quite a benign figure, the George Bush administration, and his peddling of the lie that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. The body count from that disinformation campaign is still growing. It's in the hundreds of thousands now. No disinformation campaign by any populist leader in the 21st century is anywhere close to matching the harm caused by that particular lie. Yeah? So what I hope will happen as a result of this rising in the public agenda globally is that this will in fact open the media's eyes and the public eyes to state-sponsored lying, no matter in what shape it comes. Because the truth is, and I think that's what the questioner was trying to get at, is that sometimes, in fact most of the time, those lies come packaged in quite civilized and rational ways. And maybe history will judge that Trump and Duterte and others like them have done us a favor by finally putting this endemic problem, of politicians lying high up on the agenda, because certainly they are not exceptional in that regard.
Josa, the double jeopardy is we're being told lies at taxpayers' expense. So the accountability issue has yet to be uncovered here. So, Josa?
We have to credit the Philippine media for the efforts to debunk fake news, false information. Of course, a lot of media organizations are into news or media literacy, and I think that's an important project. Some media organizations are also into fact-checking. Some are doing fake blocking, fake block. This is blocking news sites that are false, peddling false information and simply spreading fake news. And I think the media as a sector, as an industry, is doing its share to frustrate the spread of fake news. I think this would also mean or necessitate a response from the public to complement what we're doing. Because of course, we are taking the lead because we're a sector that was immensely affected, and our credibility as agenda-setting media was so eroded, and I think we have to continue doing so. Continue doing these initiatives, and also ask the public to also do it.
Okay, I just wanted Ron to go back to that story of his line about the lying, but also the drama. So could you lie and with drama, meaning the lies well told here, could we shift it to truth well told with drama also? How do you propose to do it? I will repeat. Okay, we'll go back to Ron because he made a very important point about problem is it's lying, but also it's drama. So how could you shift the opposition of telling the truth very well? I mean, truth well told. I mean, we have bloggers and journalists here. How can we do things better so that the lies would be undercut by the truth?
Journalism can also engage in drama, just presenting the truth and the facts by the way we write our stories. Because we're normally prescribed to do, we just do who, what, and where, right? There's no drama in it. But if, for instance, the president can do a snackable information, meaning it's a snack.
Sexy, snackable.
Correct. Or memes. Why can't journalists, with their stories, also do the same thing? I mean, you can present, for instance, your numbers, your figures, your stories. I mean, if they can use people to surface their issue, then journalists can do the same thing. But currently, we insist on writing a very strict narrative. So one way by which we can do that is show a face. I mean, it's almost similar because I'm currently doing a study on how corruption stories are being done. I think my advisor is here on that one. How do journalists write corruption stories? They only look at personalities. They do not write stories about its impact to society, its impact to psyche, to their religious belief and all of that one. So we're basically interested only in one aspect of it.
Okay, does anybody want the final round? You have a president that's the source of disinformation, but also in a context where the political opposition is weak and effete or has joined forces with him, and you have democratic institutions that are also weak and compromised or broken. So how do you deal with a problem like Duterte in the Philippine context where there's nobody else talking or out-talking or outsmarting him, and the institutions are weak and compromised to begin with? The police, the courts, etc. So this is a disinformation malady that lingers because of so many other weaknesses at the seams of Philippine politics.
I think that's where media's role becomes more urgent. We should not only challenge the presidency, but maybe all sectors of society. Yeah, and even ourselves, you know, we should challenge ourselves. Yeah, make it. We should make ourselves more relevant. Yeah.
All citizens, for that matter.
Yes.
Okay. Cherian, so how do you deal with a problem like this? Ron, can you? Good luck. That's all you can tell us. Oh God, that's all. Good luck to you too, wherever you are in Southeast Asia. Ron?
Continue vigilance. I mean, continue fact-checking, continue source-checking, continue calling him out.
Okay.
I mean, always do a PR rañada. That's how it should be done. Because if nobody will face him, I mean, similar to what she's doing.
Stand up.
Stand up. Because it's easy nowadays to just fold up and say, it'll pass. It'll just be 6 years.
All right. Remain vigilant and stand up. I just have a little public service announcement. Tomorrow, the media groups, CMFR, NUJP, PPI, and the PCIJ are joining the UP Fair starting tomorrow from February 13 to 17. So we invite you students from 6 p.m. to 12 midnight, but we have featured events. So journalists will be there to take selfies with you, actually to thank the public and to interact and to actually express our gratitude to all the citizens who had supported press freedom and the people's right to know.
I shouldn't be so facetious, but I explain why I just said good luck. As a Singaporean, I have no experience of a society where you can challenge a strong government from the opposition, right? Because, but by comparison, the Philippine opposition, media, civil society seem very healthy compared with what we have in Singapore, right? But in fact, I think looking at the silver lining is clear to me that at least in the Philippines, in fact, Maria and I were talking about this in contrast to, say, Myanmar, you do have deep roots of media, civil society, activists, universities, etc., challenging authority. Yeah? The foundations are there to build on. Yeah. So it's in that context that I said, good luck. Yeah.
Yeah, well taken. So we have a saying in the media, who blinks first loses. Don't ever, for whatever reason, blink first. We should continue the fight for democracy and thwart disinformation. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Our panelists, Cherry and George, Diosa Labiste, Ellen Tordesillas, and Ron Habal. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat. Okay.